Over the last, gosh, over the last 4 or 5 years, I think you've probably sent several dozen of your captains, battalion chiefs, to participate in our leadership academy. I've never had a conversation with you that the word leadership didn't come up probably in the first 2 minutes. You have this passion for developing leaders. Tell me a little bit more about that. You said earlier that you weren't a natural born leader. I think we can both agree that we all can become better leaders.
Yeah.
But tell me a little bit about where that passion to develop other leaders came from for you.
Okay. And I agree with you. I think, we talk about a lot about being students of leadership. And I believe, you and I are both of that. I don't know that we ever like get there, right? Um, but what I tell others is, man, I may not always be the best leader, or I'll make mistakes, but I don't know anybody that tries harder. I mean, I think about it all the time, and through a lot of self-reflection. If I find myself, my blood pressure going up because of something somebody said or whatever, I really try to evaluate, well, why is that? Does that cause me, this feeling because of my ego? Because I'm the fire chief or whatever it is, or is it fear? Is what's causing this feeling? And I think self-reflection has been really, really helpful, especially later in my career. Um, yeah, really a lot of self-eval. But going back to your question, I was what was called a hotshot crew foreman at the age of 24, which meant I had a 10-person module out of the 20-person hotshot crew. So you have a superintendent who's responsible for all 20, and then you've got two foremen. Now they're called crew captains. Back then we were called crew foremen, back in the 70s and 80s, I think, and into the 90s, in the 60s before that. And so here I'm at 24 years old.
And don't get to run the chainsaw anymore.
I don't get to run the chainsaw anymore. I've promoted up from that, right? This is a step up from that. And, I grew up at a time, my father served in the Navy in World War II and in the South Pacific and Korea. And I had four brothers, and things were very much, this is how it worked. And I took orders, and that was, you did what you were told. I didn't so much, which got me in a lot of trouble. But that was just go back to culture, that's just the way it was. And here I am starting in 1978. It's, towards the ending of the Vietnam War just ended, and a lot of the people I'm working with are veterans because they had a veterans preference getting out of the war in Southeast Asia. They were getting the civilian federal jobs. And so most of the people I'm working with on these crews, were veterans. And it was still very much a do as you're told, don't ask questions, you just do. And to be accepted back then, as an 18-year-old, me and one other 18-year-old kid, you had to work hard. You had to hang with the crew at night, and you drank hard, and you did all those things, but you didn't speak up. You kept your mouth shut, and you did as you were told. Fast forward 6 years, I'm 24 years old, and that's my model, right? Mm-hmm. And so I'm really good at telling people what to do, how it's going to be, what I expect, and was a real jerk, and just
many of us were,
right. I mean, that's the model. I thought I was that was the role model I had, and it was very effective with me. And I got people to do what I needed to do, and it wasn't until I tell the story. I would believe we were up on the Forks of the Salmon at some fire in Idaho, and there were hotshot superintendents that were legendary. There were a handful back then, two or three, that, man, if these people acknowledged you, just held them on a pedestal. I was doing something, man, that I loved to do, and man, that's what I wanted to ultimately be, was a crew superintendent. These were the guys. If they acknowledged you in fire camp and by name, oh man, this was a big deal, right? Oh, yeah. And so I'm lining my 10-person module out on the banks of the river, and I'm probably yelling and telling them what you do and blah blah blah, and they go off and do their thing, and I hear this whistle, and I look up the hill, up the bank, and here's one of those superintendents. He's kind of waving me up. I'm like, oh, he said, I'm going to go get go outside. Sit down. Call people sport. Sit down, sport. As I sat down, and I hadn't really talked with him much in my career, and he basically, as I recall, asked me how I thought things went. how do you think things went? I said, man, I think it went great. I mean, I have tasks to do. They're out doing it, this and that. And in his own way, in retrospect, was sharing with me that maybe there's another way of getting people to do what you need them to do, which I didn't really understand because my way was effective. I mean, what do you mean there's another way? And he handed me he went into his pack and he dug out a book, and it was The Art of War from Sun Tzu. It was a beat up old book. And he said, look, and he was known to be a voracious reader. I mean, I knew people that had worked for him on his crew. And he says, I'm going to give this to you, and we'll see you later in the summer or the fall, whatever. And we're going to sit down. I'm going to be asking you questions about so now I'm really blown away, right? And now I've got an assignment.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm like, oh, God,
That's not light reading.
Oh, no. At 24 years old, man, I opened that thing up, and it's like, oh, my God, what is this? I didn't understand it, and he's going to ask me questions later. There's a lot of pressure, right? And, I ran into him later in the summer, and I don't know I can't recall exactly how that went, but we didn't call them mentors back then, right? I had a mentor or this and that. They were just, and you didn't even think of it like that. They were just people that for whatever reason, I guess, saw something in you or knew you'd be around. I have no idea to this day why I got singled out. And maybe it was because he saw the way I lined that crew out, and I just happened to be at the right place at the right time. I got introduced to others, and next thing you know, fast forward 10 years, I'm now with San Diego, but the same person is now invites me to a meeting of the NWCG Leadership Committee. I'm like, wow, now I'm going to go watch these guys. Little did I know, he was getting to retire. He'd retired from the Forest Service, went to Santa Barbara County, and was basically going to hand off to me. But he never said anything. He just was gone. Next thing I know, I'm being asked, hey, do you want to take his spot? I'm like, well, that was his plan the whole time, right? I didn't know that. Wow. And all of a sudden you're doing things with other people that are passionate about leadership or reading everything I can. Goes from leadership reading to human behavior to a variety of business stuff. Your reading kind of evolves. And again, I don't know. I never expected to be the fire chief. I wasn't educated. I had a high school, barely got out of high school because I was screwing off so much and was an athlete. But when people ask, and I get this all the time, they go, so did you always want to be the fire chief? And my answer is absolutely not. That was never on the freaking plan. Never. Are you kidding me? I can't believe, and my friends that knew me way back in the day can't believe it either, right? They go, you? I said, man, I know. They do poor background checks, I guess. I don't know.